Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talk That Talk with Ardent Flair. With me, Mariam Umar Meriga, as your host. Talk That Talk is an avenue for youth to sit over tea and discuss issues that are pertinent to the youths of our generation and our religion. So, with me today is another guest, Fatima Bello Mai. And inshallah, today we'll be talking about modesty, a girl's dignity in Islam. So, Fatima, you're welcome and thank you so much for honoring my invitation.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so our topic today, modesty. In every girl's life, especially as a Muslimah, as a growing Muslimah, there's that constant need, to cover. There's that constant obsession that people have with the hijab, with the modesty and everything. So, what's that obsession? Like seriously, what's the obsession with, modesty and the girls dressing in Islam?
Okay, so Bismillah. Just like you said, there seems to be some sort of obsession about what a woman wears. And I think, apart from just in Islam, it's just a general societal thing where everyone wants to say what they think women should wear. And as Muslims, we always go back to Quran and Sunnah, right? And we know that our Prophet ﷺ said that every single religion or every single ummah has their own character, like the defining character, and the defining character of Islam is modesty, is haya. And so when we see this topic coming up again and again and again, we kind of lose touch and we think, well, why are they always talking about this?
Why are they talking
And
about?
I know this because personally I've been on that side of whenever I'm asked to talk, or not whenever, but a lot of times I'm asked to talk, it's always about talk to the girls about hijab, talk to the girls about hijabs. Never talk to the girls about salah or talk to the girls about iman or anything of that sort. It's always about hijab. Now, this is not to undermine the value of the hijab because, like we said, modesty is, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the defining character of a Muslim. And note how he didn't say a Muslim woman, he said a Muslim. So when we're speaking about modesty, I think it's important that we also note or acknowledge that Islam doesn't only kind of limited to women. It's for both men and women. In fact, if we look at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the most modest person, when you think of modesty, the person that comes to mind
is
Uthman. Well, yeah, obviously the Prophet ﷺ, but I'm speaking from the Sahaba. You would expect that it would be a woman.
Yeah.
Okay. But when we're talking, when even the Prophet ﷺ, he acknowledged that Uthman, he was the most modest when it came to modesty. That was his thing. And that's not to say that the women were not modest, but we have to understand that modesty is a characteristic. It's not just what we see on the outside, but it's also what's on the inside. It's a merging of both, really, and it covers both men and women. So when we're speaking about this, particularly to women, there is more. Yes, we need to cover more, but let's also acknowledge that the men are also supposed to be modest, and that modesty starts from within and then comes
externally
outside.
So what is the need to wear hijab? Why are we as females, advised to wear hijab, and in general, why are we advised to be modest in Islam?
Okay, so we know the verse. I don't need to repeat the verse, but we know the verses in Surah Nur and Ahzab, right?
Yeah.
About the hijab and how we should cover, what we should cover, all of that. Now, a lot of people ask this question, well, why should we wear it? What's the need to wear it? And I personally believe that there is no concrete reason, just like everything else with Islam. Because not to say that there's no reason, obviously there are reasons.
People tell us enough because Allah said we should.
Exactly. But people would tell you, okay, wear the hijab because you don't want to be harassed by men, or wear the hijab because it's going to protect you from being raped and things like that. Sure, the hijab helps with that, but when Allah told us to wear the hijab, the covering, what was the reason that he gave us? He didn't tell us wear it because you're not going to be harassed. Because to be honest, even I, who people would see and say, oh, mashallah, she covers well, I get harassed by men too.
Yeah.
It doesn't kind of make you immune to that. Exactly. But it is an advantage that oftentimes comes with wearing the hijab. But I believe that is not the main reason. the main reason we wear the hijab is because Allah said we should wear the hijab. And first time we spoke, we mentioned how when you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you trust Him to the point where, you know, you're okay. Like, you trust Him and you love Him and you understand that whatever Allah asks you to do is
It's
for
for
your
your own
own
good.
benefit. So you know that, and so Allah says, wear the hijab, you're going to wear the hijab. And I love the story of when the verse of hijab actually came down, and the women, the Sahaba, they started like ripping out their fabrics and covering up. And I asked myself, and I think everyone should ask themselves, why were they so eager to cover up? It wasn't because of anything else, but because they
Allah's
had
intention.
that strong relationship and that strong connection and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah said we should do this, we're going to do this. And we are the ummah of sami'na wa ata'na. We hear and we obey. So we wear the hijab because Allah says we should wear the hijab, we should cover up in a certain way.
So what about things like makeup? You know, makeup on its own, I feel, is not, it's a two-way thing. There's a way you can do makeup and you're okay, you're good, you're not changing, you're not looking like a diva or something. But there's another part of makeup that when you do it, you're completely, you know, going astray, you're deviating from the path of Allah. So can you shed more light on that?
Okay. Well, we know that Allah is beautiful and He loves beauty, first of all. And with makeup, like you said, I think there's an extreme and then there's a not so extreme. So it depends on what you mean by makeup. If it's enhancing your features, like maybe you're just putting on some lip gloss things, you know. And even with that, you have to know which kind of environment that you're wearing that in. And one thing that I personally say to people is, listen, especially to the girls, because I feel like with girls, we have this obsession over how we look. We feel like that is what
defines us.
Yeah, that's what defines us, or that's where our worth is. And you know, it's painful because Islam came to shatter that and tell you that your worth is not just in your body. And so it's disheartening to see how society has kind of took us back to that point where we're so obsessed with how we look because we believe that that is
always
where
having
our
a
worth
mirror with
is.
you.
Yeah, and so we wear the makeup to change ourselves because we believe that we
don't look good enough
or things like that. And I'd say two things. Number one, God did your makeup. Like, God did your makeup. It's like take for instance, maybe I bake your cake and it's a pretty cake. I do the frosting, it's all nice and it's perfect. And then I bring it to you and you say, okay, it's nice, but I want it to look a certain way. And then you pour like maybe paint. You use paint to like add some color to it or something. That's it. The cake is ruined. So Allah has already made that perfect frosting. So you don't need to add it. And the second thing that I say is, or I believe, is that we're not meant to look perfect. Like, I remember watching something with someone during Ramadan. So there was this series by Dr. Omar Suleiman, the Jannah series, and there was this episode where he talked about how we're going to look like in Jannah, and he described how perfect and beautiful everyone's going to look. And someone told me, we're watching, and she told me, she was like, ugh, that's why we need makeup in this world. And I was thinking, okay, but I didn't really believe it because I think in Jannah, that's where everything's perfect, right? So when we get there, we're going to be perfect. But this world is imperfect, and so we're going to have imperfections. You're going to have acne. Your nose is not going to look pimples the way you want it to look. It's normal and it's natural. And I think there's a beauty in that and a rahmah in that, and it's kind of like a sign, a reminder to us every time that, you know what, this world is not perfect. When I look at myself in the mirror, like, yeah, I'm not perfect, but you know, the world is not meant to be perfect. When we're meant to be perfect in Jannah, inshallah, we'll be perfect.
So what about like in makeup? What about stuff like, you know, carving your eyebrows or adding eyelashes? Some people feel like, okay, if I don't carve my eyebrows, if I don't add that lashes thing, or if I don't paint my nails with this kind of nail polish, I'm not even wearing complete makeup. So, and they don't get the fact that Islam says, okay, it's haram for you to add or reduce something that Allah has given to you. It's just like plastic surgery. People getting nose jobs, people trying to, you know, give themselves jawlines, all these kind of stuff. I feel it all boils down to people not appreciating themselves and not appreciating the way Allah created them. So
just like you said, it's back to what I said at the beginning. God did your makeup in the first place, and you're not meant to look perfect. Remind yourself of that. When you're constantly reminding yourself that this world, there's more to this, my existence, than this world, the realm of this world. There's a world beyond that, and that's where perfection exists. And so I should strive in this world to make sure that I do the deeds that will get me perfection in the next.
Inshallah. So what is modesty meant to look like outside of, okay, fine, I'm covering, I'm wearing hijab. What does modesty look like outside of your dressing, outside of your covering?
Okay, so the word haya, we translate it as modesty and we reduce it to the clothing. But like with everything else in the deen, like your salah, your psalm, everything, it starts from the inside. It starts from your heart. And so haya, true haya, it really, it's in your heart. And that's not an excuse, because we live in a world where people want to be very selective with what they learn of the religion, or what they use, or what they take from the religion. So some people would tell you, they're not wearing hijab, and when you advise them or something like that, they're like, well, you don't know what's in my heart. I don't know what's in your heart, and I'm not trying to tell you that you're a bad person for not wearing it, or you go to hell, or things like that. But you have to understand that whatever is in your heart is going to manifest outwardly. Like, you know how your mom, she's like super into plants, right? So you might relate to this. But when you have a plant, when you want it to grow and you want it to like look all beautiful and have the nice leaves and all of that, you water it, you take care of it, make sure it's getting enough sunlight, things like that. And even beyond that, when we study biology, we know like the plant hormones, the auxins, all of that, and how it affects it. And so if you're taking care of the inside, which is the roots that are inside, you have to water it, things like that. If it's getting enough nutrients, it's going to show outwardly. And different plants grow at different rates, right? Just like different people grow at different rates. I might be struggling with wearing the outside hijab, but maybe in my heart I truly, like, I know I need to do it, but then I'm working on it, but then I'm a little slow. And so with that, I would say people should be, if you're on the other side and you're seeing somebody who's struggling, you should have some level of compassion, where you don't know the struggle that the person is going through, and just because your struggle isn't outward like theirs, it doesn't make it any better than theirs. It doesn't make you any better than that person. So I think it's something that comes from within. And there's a verse Allah says, إِنْ يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ خَيْرًا يُؤْتِكُمْ خَيْرًا, that if Allah knows that there's something good in your heart, He would give you good. And so if you truly accept and acknowledge that, okay, this is something that I need to do, I need to work on my modesty and things like that, and you have that in your heart, and you're like, okay, we're going to start working on this, and okay, you want to read more Quran, get closer to Allah, know Allah, so that it will be easy for you to even wear it. If you're in that point, then inshallah Allah will give you the ability and the strength to do it.
Inshallah.
And,
go for a short break, inshallah, with this. This is an ad from Raka Multi-Concept Limited. They have amazing shoes. You should check them out.
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome back from the break. We've been talking with Fatima about a girl's modesty in Islam. We've talked at length about the Quran sayings about modesty, the obsession with a female's modesty, the need to wear hijab, and at length why women should wear hijab. So the discussion continues. Fatima, how is a girl expected to behave in Islam? That kind of behavior that showcases her inner haya. What kind of behavior should she, be known for and in certain environments?
Okay, I think this is something that is pretty easy, really, because it's natural in us. We have this fitrah, and we know how we're supposed to act. We know what is on the brink of shamelessness. We know what is on the brink of morality. We know what is morality. And Islam, what Islam does is to reinforce that for us. So, for example, inner haya, like we're talking about the haya that stems from the heart, right? It's the same for both men and women. So, for instance, vulgar speech. something that's not allowed. If you're
Mm.
talking, you have to talk in a certain tone, in a certain way. And for
Mm.
women, we have this way of, sweet talking and stuff like that.
Mhm.
You should definitely avoid things like that. And I think it's just natural. We know it already. We have it in our fitrah. So the way that you talk, the way that you walk, the way that you engage with other people. And some people make this mistake of, okay, the haya is only the way that you interact with the opposite gender, but it also applies to the way that you
The
interact with
same
the
gender.
same gender as well. So the way that you interact with your peers, the opposite gender, and just keeping to the teachings of
The
Islam, the
Prophet.
core teachings of Islam.
So, what do we do to revive the level of modesty in today's community? Because I find that, like, especially our women, it's either the teenage girls that are supposed to be mothers tomorrow, are out there dancing to TikTok trends. They're out there doing, baseless things that are adding they're adding nothing to their skill. And I feel there should be a way we can revive that, because we already have the knowledge, we know what we're supposed to do, like you said. So how do we, bring this back to life? How do we bring the hayat, the modesty? How do we revive that modesty in our community today, specifically for women?
Okay, so like you said, it's not a lack of knowledge because we know, but it's a lack of something inside us that allows us to implement that knowledge. And so the advice would be work on your heart and then work outwards. It's the easiest. It's sometimes it takes a bit of time, but it's the most effective way of achieving anything that you want to do in life. It has to stem from your identity. If I believe in my heart that, okay, I'm a Muslim and I should be doing XYZ, then, and I have that connection with Allah to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this for His sake, then it comes easy. It's not like bed of roses, but then it's going to become to some extent easy to do those things. And I feel like there's a personal, like an individual level to this, and there's also the communal level. So on an individual level, you have people who are struggling to wear the hijab, and then you have people
Let's
who
say
are
converts.
yeah, and you have people who are on the other end of the spectrum, and they're wearing full hijab and stuff like that. So for the people who are not wearing the hijab, I feel like there's a lot of focus on them in the community, like they should be wearing it, they should be da 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 da. But we have to understand that there's a reason why they're not wearing it. You might think the reason is, oh, they're just a bad person, they don't read the Quran, they're just they're looking at the Western system of life too much, they're too influenced by it. Yes, that might be the cause, but you don't know what the cause is. And the fix for that is really to get them to a state where they can, on their own, understand why they need to wear the hijab. And that's by teaching them, that's by being with them, showing a level of compassion and things like that. And personally, I've seen how this transpires. I have a friend who, this is a girl who everybody knows her to be party girl, like hardcore party girl. And she's always wearing the makeup, always listening to the music, all of those things, and she has social media following, all of that, and people know her for that. And she's someone I've known for a very long time. And we've been, the way that I have been taught, and my mom, Allah bless her, the way she teaches is she shows you, like, she's not the one to like start forcing you, like, to do this, you have to do that. And I think that's what I was doing with that friend, because this was a friend that I would see all the time. She was coming to my house all the time, so I was like, listen, if she has some bad habits, let's figure out a way to help her with it. And to be honest, it was just compassion. Okay, she does something wrong, got to a point where she'd come to me and she'd be like, I did this, I don't feel good about this, what do I do? And then from there on, we've been working, and you wouldn't believe it, the other day she came to me and she was like, okay, we should go to university together. And this is not the first time she told me that. She told me we should go to university together. I was like, okay. And she was like, we should start wearing niqab together. And I was like, what?
Someone that wasn't even, wearing the hijab before.
And I was like, you want to do that? And she's like, yeah, eventually I want to get to that point. And I was like, we're going to do it then.
Inshallah.
And then I was like, we're going to keep working. And so for people who are struggling, really, you have to understand that people have different circumstances, and it's different things that take them away. So we just have to find the most effective way to bring them back. And that truly is the example of the Prophet ﷺ. He taught us how to really do it, how to teach people with you lead by example. He was a leader that led by example, and then the compassion as well. You're being compassionate, but still you're not kind of bending the rules, but you're being compassionate about it, and that way you're reaching to people. And on a communal level as well, we need to have a community. Like, we need to have a very supportive community. We tend to have this divide where it's okay, these are very practicing Muslimas, and then these are non-practicing Muslimas, and there's this kind of dichotomy, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help in any way, because one side is feeling, we're horrible people and we're just going to go along with it, we don't care. And then there's the other side, just like, we're the good people, and they have this arrogance, and so we have to find a way to bridge that gap in the community. Like, there's more that unites us than divides us, right? So let's find that common ground where, even if you're struggling with the hijab, you should be able to come to the masjid, and that is what's going to help you. But I see sisters like who, because they don't wear the hijab, and like people are like, okay, why is she coming to the masjid on Jum'ah? Like, why is she coming with the hijab on Jum'ah? Like, what she's doing, hypocrisy, So we need to find a way to revive that sisterhood back. And just like I said with the Sahabiyat, when the verse of hijab came, the reason they were so like eager and like they just did it was, number one, the connection with Allah was so strong, and because they had that community that the Prophet ﷺ fostered, where it was on, the Prophet ﷺ says this, or he tells us Allah said this, we're going to do it. So we need to be able to revive that sisterhood, inshallah.
So there's this kind of clash between religion and culture when it comes to wearing hijab. As a typical Hausa person, it no longer feels, for some people, no longer feels like an obligation, like you're, being obedient to Allah, the wearing of hijab. It just feels like the hijab is part of my culture. And okay, you're not Hausa, let's say, because Hausa is mostly, mashallah, they cover with the hijab, but then people are thinking, it's clashing with your culture and your, religion. So is it really a cultural thing? Is the hijab now a cultural thing for us? Or is it still as it has always been, the prescription of Allah from the Quran?
Okay, one thing that we should understand is that as Muslims, our first identity is we're Muslims. And so what kind of dictates our code of conduct, everything in our life, is Islam. Our culture is not undermined by Islam, but it has to fit into the boundaries of Islam. If something in our culture is going against what Islam says, we have to cut it off. But then if it's within the boundaries of Islam, no problem. Now, like you said, the thing about modesty, we cover as maybe northern women, we're used to the covering, but the covering might not actually be what Islam says. We're covering more than some people are, but then we're not covering to the extent that we should, right? But it's a cultural thing, and when we let that kind of foster that thought that our culture and religion is one and the same, it kind of brings that kind of confusion that, okay, am I wearing this for Allah, or am I just wearing this because it's a cultural thing? And again, with everything in the deen, be it hijab, be it salah, anything, it has to be for the sake of Allah. It has to be for the sake of Allah. So I think culture is not bad in and of itself, but then the way that we teach the culture and enforce, or the way, the mindset in which we operate, there has to be some sort of balance, and there has to be a strict, not a strict, but there has to be some division, like, okay, this is religion, this is culture.
Okay, mashallah. So before we round up, what else do you want to add to what we've discussed?
Well, I would just reiterate, I always do this, but again, the hijab is an external manifestation of what is in your heart and the work that you have done on your heart. And so if you're someone who's just starting out, someone who's struggling with it, what I would recommend is fix your heart. Like, fix your heart. Try to get to a better place with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you feel connected to Him to a point where you love him, you trust him, and you're willing to do whatever he asks you to do simply because of that connection and that love. And it is a struggle. Find people who can help you with that. And if you're on the other side of the spectrum where you are, alhamdulillah, wearing what would be considered the proper hijab, then try to reach out. You know, there's a wisdom in, for instance, Allah sending prophets. Like, if you wanted to, you could just, give everybody their own wahi and that's it. But He sent prophets to go back to their own brethren, their own brothers and sisters who are, struggling, and to help them get back on the track. So, on whichever side of the spectrum you are, just remember that we're all in this for the sake of Allah. And so, whatever we're trying to do, let's try and do for the sake of Allah and help one another.
Okay. Inshallah. So, inshallah, with this, I would like to round up. We've been talking about modesty, a girl's dignity in Islam. We've talked at length about the obsession about women's modesty in Islam, the need to wear hijab, what you say to women who struggle with the hijab, and how to, make that form a connection with Allah so that you are easily, you can easily do what He asks us to do, and then how we can easily, revive that culture and modesty and the way we, associate with one another in Islam. So I would like to say thank you for watching, and Fatima, thank you for coming and thank you for having this discussion with me. It was nice having you. Thank you for watching, and Assalamu Alaikum Warahmatullahi Wabarakatuh.